Hey everybody, welcome back to the 80s Slashers YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to take a look back at the year 1980 and basically discuss the year in slashers. We're gonna go back and we'll take a look at all the slashers that were released that year. And we start off by just kind of listing them all. Maybe briefly discussing them. Then look at some of the statistics from the year. Things such as the number of tickets sold, the budgets for some of these films, the box office returns, the profitability. Some of that stuff just to get an overall feeling for how the year in slashers played out. And then once we take a look and identify all the films. I thought I would just kind of wrap it up by giving some of my overall thoughts on the year itself. Whether I found it was a good year, a bad year, a decent year, and any other thoughts on the year 1980 in regards to slashers. And once we get through this is kind of going to be the beginning of a little series here. So after this, we'll continue on to 81, 82. And 83, we'll keep going from there until we get through to 1989. So let's not waste any time. Let's just get right into it. So, the first thing I want to take a look at here, we're just kind of give a brief overview before we get into the specific films themselves. So, 1980. Now all these numbers and stats and everything. These are just the numbers that I've been able to find, all the information that I've been able to pull from the internet and other resources that I have. So as you can see on here, I have listed a total number of slashers released in 1980 as 15. Now, other people may look at this and have a smaller number or a bigger number of slashers released. I settled on 15 because these are the films that I view as slashers in regards to what I view as a slasher, as an 80s slasher. And even within these 15, we'll get to them, but there's a couple questionable picks, but I still put them as an 80s slasher just for, they contain at least some elements. So 15 total films, which is a pretty solid year, when you think about it. Now, when you look here and you see the approximate number of movie tickets sold, I have over 31 million tickets I have listed. Now, this is not the highest number for sure. This is only 31 million is the number from 6 films of the 15, because that's the only information I could get. So there's still well over half of the films released. I don't have the numbers for tickets sold, but of the top grossing, I guess, 6 films, over 31 million tickets sold in 1980 for slashers, which is to me that's a pretty big number. And when you combine that again with the overall box office sales, in 1980 dollars, it was over $83 million. And again, same thing. It's not for all the movies. I think there's only 7, the top 7 films included in that number. So there's still 8 missing. So it's a higher number than that for sure. But yeah, over 83 million in box office sales. And if you were to adjust that for inflation to 2020, that puts it over almost $250 million, which, is a pretty good haul for 80 slashers. So, yeah, they did. I would say it was a fairly, successful year. And obviously it's due to mainly one film, which we'll talk about, but yeah. And then just some fun facts, number of holiday themed films. There's 6 films that have like some kind of like a holiday theme or a celebratory day or something like that in the title. And Jamie Lee Curtis films, we have 2. Yeah. So yeah, pretty decent year. So let's get into the films here. So yeah, I'll talk about these in the order in which they were released in the theater. So now, I wouldn't be surprised if many people think obviously the first 80s slasher ever released was Friday the 13th. But it actually wasn't. Technically, the first slasher film released in the 80s, according to the way I view them, was To All a Good Night, which is a film released in January of 1980, one directed by David Hess, who was most known as Krug in Wes Craven's Last House on the Left. And this was the first 80s like Santa slasher, Christmas slasher film. So yeah, this was released really early in the end of January of 1980. So it was technically the first 80s slasher released. Then after that, in May of 1980, of course, May 9th, 1980, was Friday the 13th, which broke the mold. It kind of set everything in motion for the rest of the decade. So yeah, there's not much I need to say. I've talked about Friday the 13th quite a bit in this channel. And then after that, we have Maniac that was released also around May of 1980. And again, this is its own kind of film. It didn't really follow any formula up to this point. It was its own kind of sleazy, grimy, kind of twisted, demented type of slasher film. Yeah, and then after that, we bump up a couple months to around August of 1980, and we get He Knows You're Alone, which is a film that was clearly inspired from Halloween. Like some of the musical cues, some of the stalking sequences was just clearly right out of Halloween. And this is, of course, Tom Hanks's debut feature, which is kind of a fun fact that he starred in one of these 80s slashers films. And then we get a a film called Terror on Tour, which is kind of I guess you could say like the band Kiss meets a horror slasher. That's what they kind of look like there. I think the band in there is called the Clowns. And yeah, it's like a slasher set around a rock group and groupies and that kind of thing. I would say it's original, but we get another one, and I believe it's 84 with October Blood. So there's two of these films in the genre, like the rock slashers or whatever you want to call them. And then after that, we skip ahead up to September when the genre really started to pick up some steam in 1980, and we have Schzoid, which is it's like a giallo inspired slasher, which is really interesting at the time because again, like before this, Italian giallos were very popular. So Schzoid is one of the first. Well, I guess it is the first giallo-inspired 80s slasher to make its appearance. We definitely have more to follow. But yeah. And then soon after that, also in September, we get arguably what's probably the first attempt to emulate Friday the 13th in Prom Night, starring Jamie Lee Curtis from Halloween fame, and this one did well. 1980, September 1980. Yeah, Prom Night. Pretty good film. I enjoy this one quite a bit. Also in September we have Mother's Day, which is a Trauma released film. Now this is one, again, it's slasher adjacent, I guess you could say. It's there's some slasher elements. It's definitely something else, but I've always included it as an 80s slasher. So yeah, Mother's Day. And then we get into October of 1980, and we get Funeral Home, which is a film that's not really inspired by Halloween, not really inspired by Friday the 13th. It was actually inspired by Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Um, yeah, very, very clearly inspired by Psycho. Also in October, we get our second European Italian type film, an Antropophagus. Again, another one slasher elements to it. It's its own kind of thing. It's got that European Euro sleaze Italian type feel to it. But I'll definitely include it on the list here. And then also in October, we get the next Jamie Lee Curtis slasher film in Terror Train, which is another great one. And October just keeps going. The pace picks up, and we get Motel Hell. Now again, here's another one that's definitely has some slasher elements, but it's its own thing. It's kind of a quirky horror film that, like I said, it's doing its own thing, but there's definitely some slasher elements in there. And then wrapping up October is an Australian slasher film called Nightmares. Also, it can also be called Stage Fright is an alternate title. But yeah, Nightmares, an Australian slasher film. Yeah, so October had quite a few films released. And then we basically move into the holiday season, and in November, Christmas Evil is released. This is, again, just like To All a Good Night. It's the second, Santa slasher, holiday slasher released in 1980. And then to wrap up the year, just almost right near the middle, later part of December 1980, we have New Year's Evil. And yeah, that's a holiday film, set around the holiday season, obviously New Year's Eve. So yeah, that's it. It's a pretty interesting year. Like I said, we kind of had a slow start. From January to August. We had about 5 films. Terror on Tour, Maniac, As You're Alone, To All a Good Night, and Friday the 13th. Pretty solid set of films. There's a couple lesser known titles in there. But they were spaced apart pretty good. Obviously, once Friday the 13th came out, there was kind of, when people saw the success of it, there was obviously a rush to to emulate what they did. A small budget, huge box office returns. It was, a no-brainer that all these studios and filmmakers were trying to do the same thing. And you didn't really see the result of that until about September of 1980, when obviously Prom Night, like I said, was the first one where the clear emulation to take advantage of that. So yeah, September we had a few releases in Schzoid, Mother's Day, and Prom Night. And then when we roll over to October, that's when there's really a big explosion of films here. There's 5 total films in Funeral Home, Terror Train, Nightmares, Motel Hell, and Antropophagus. 2 of them are global releases, and in Antropophagus is an Italian film, and Nightmare is Australian film. So we're starting to reach elsewhere besides the States. And again, the Terror Train, obviously, like they're grabbing Jamie Lee Curtis again from Prom Night, trying to jump on the bandwagon of Friday the 13th and Halloween. And then, we end the year in November, December with 2 holiday films. And so yeah, slow start to the year, but starting in September, it starts to build. You start to see some of the Friday the 13th inspired films. And yeah, you can really see where the genre is going. It's slowly starting to build up. So it's pretty exciting. So before we go any further and talk about, my thoughts on the year as a whole, let's just go and take a look at some of the some of the statistics for the year. So, well, first we'll take a look at the budgets. Now, when you see here it's pretty interesting. The highest budget film was Terror Train, and that makes sense. Because this was one of the ones where they were trying to capitalize on the success of Friday the 13th. So they threw a little more money at it. And yeah, so 3.5 million budget for a slasher film in 1980 is pretty high. Especially when you look down the list and you see, Friday the 13th there, it was only $700,000 budget. And so yeah, it's Terror Trains. They spent a lot of money on that film. I'm surprised to see that Motel Hell had a $3 million budget. It doesn't seem like it had that, but I guess it did. Prom Night. That sounds about right. 1.6. It's a little more than double the budget for Friday 13th. So yeah, if you know Home 1.4. And then you get into some of the like you look at Mother's Day, 150,000. That's trauma, I guess. And I think they did a fantastic job for a budget of $150,000. Maniac, Christmas Evil, all around the $500,000 mark. So, pretty interesting. And again, like I said, these are the titles that I can get the information for. Yeah. So let's take a look at the amount of tickets sold. Same thing. This is the only information I can have. You see, there's only six films listed here, and yeah, you see, Friday the 13th sold almost 15 million tickets. And you look at like the next highest on the list, Prom Night, with only 5.5 million. It's pretty wild how well Friday the 13th did. It's pretty outstanding. But Prom Night, 5.5 million. That's pretty good ticket sales. Maniac, 3.7. And you see, it's kind of funny because Terror Train. Well, we'll see when we get to the box office there. But they had the biggest budget of all these films, and they're of the ones reported, they're the fourth highest. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. They probably weren't too. Maybe it was too. Prom Night came out first, so maybe they were. Maybe there's a little Jamie Lee Curtis overdose or something like that. But yeah, so let's take a look at like the box office sales now. As you would expect, Friday the 13th clearly the highest took in the most cash, over almost $40 million, 39 million and change. This is 1980 money, so that's a staggering amount. When like the budget for Friday the 13th was $700,000. Crazy. It did so well. It's no wonder it sparked a genre, a subgenre for the rest of the decade. But yeah, like Prom Night, 14 million. That's a pretty good haul on a like they had like a $1.5 million budget. Maniac, and looks like Terror Train had $8 million, which is good. Their budget was $3.5 million, and so they still made quite a bit of money. But it's probably not the result they were looking for with getting Jamie Lee Curtis and all that. So and then yeah, the obviously Nightmares. I don't have the budget for that. So I'm not sure if they made money. 168,000 at the box office. Probably didn't make a lot of money if they made any at all. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. So if we go to like just the most profitable, again, this is just basically subtracting the budget from the box office. Yeah, Friday the 13th raked in over $39 million, which is crazy. Prom Night taking in 13 million, Maniac almost 10. He Knows You're Alone almost 5 million, Terror Train 4.5, and Motel Hell 3.3 million. So, the ones that we have the access to the information to, um, they did really well. Like this genre did really well in 1980. Again, it was a burgeoning. It was just starting to be a thing. I think it was a fairly profitable year at the box office for the 80s slashers. All right, so let's kind of just wrap it up with some just some of my thoughts on what I thought of the year itself. So yeah, so 1980. I found it's a really interesting year for the slasher. The beginning, and this is the beginning of the genre, of course. And at the beginning of the year, I feel like they just weren't really sure what to do. All they knew was that in 1978, Halloween, um, was a massive success, and from 1978 up to 1980, um, there was some films that were released that were trying to to emulate that, to try to capture piggyback off the success of Halloween. And none of them really, there was some good films, but none of them really did what Halloween was able to do. And like I said, it wasn't until May of 1980 when Friday the 13th hit, and they did exactly what people were trying to do, and they kind of put like they created the footprint, the formula of what was going to work. So of course that's what the next decade was about, trying to emulate that, and it grew into like a genre just because certain tropes, certain things were expected in these films, and that's what they tried to do. So due to this, there was in 1980 there was different styles all throughout this year. Like you had some like giallo inspired films, you know, like um, like Schzoid. Um, you had some even earlier than that. You had like psycho inspired films going back there with Funeral Home. Um, and then you had Halloween inspired films such as He Knows You're Alone. And then at some point during the year, obviously in May, Friday the 13th itself was released. And like I said before, it kind of culminated in everything coming together, and it was the film that everyone was looking for. And then from that, um, for almost the remainder of the year, these filmmakers began trying to make these Friday the 13th inspired films. Both in formula and in title. Like all these holiday themed slashers we got. There's like six of them. I know To All a Good Night was before Friday the 13th, so I guess we can't really include that one. But then you have Christmas Evil, Prom Night, New Year's Evil, and Mother's Day are all along with Friday the 13th. They're all these holiday themed slashers, and that obviously that trend, along with the formula and the title, continued for years to come. It's something that for whatever reason, like you base a slasher title on like a holiday or an event, it seemed to work, So yeah, that was basically the remainder of the year. But then this year also had some really oddball films. Like I said, like Maniac and Motel Hell and Mother's Day are all kind of their own kind of genre thing. Even Antropophagus is its own kind of thing. So yeah, this was a very eclectic type of year. Um, but when you take a look at all the films, we'll put them on the screen here. They're all these films listed. You go through the list. This is a really solid year, I think. You have like obviously Friday the 13th, Maniac. He Knows You're Alone, Prom Night, Mother's Day, Terror Train, Motel Hell, Christmas Evil, New Year's Evil. This is I feel 1980 was a really solid year. A lot of fantastic slashers, I think. Um, yeah, like later years to come, 81 specifically, and all the way up to like 84. Like we'll get there when we talk about those years, but yeah, they're probably better years, but but the thing with 1980 is you could tell as the year went on, You could see the momentum building, up until we get into 1981, which would be the explosion or like the peak of the genre. Um, so yeah, like overall, I think 1980 was an important year in slashers. It was the foundation for this subgenre that was just emerging. And even within that year, we seen a handful of really good slashers, and also some weird eclectic type of mix in there, which it made for an interesting year. So yeah, I really like 1980. I think it's a good year in slashers, and yeah, I'm excited to move forward, because say like we'll talk about 1981 next, and it's probably the best year of the 80s slasher, but we'll talk more about that when we get there. So yeah, that's basically it. That's just a small short little recap of 1980, the year in slashers. And what I'm going to do is the next video or two, I'm going to do a top 5 of my 1980 slasher films. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to check out any of these films, the trailers, I'll put a link up on the screen right here, and to check it out, and I'll leave a link below as well for like the 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 1980 slasher trailers. All right, guys, so that's it. So yeah, until next time. All right, see ya.